Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot into a warm Honolulu morning that smells faintly of plumeria, roasted pig, and just a little political anxiety. You're standing near the Iolani Palace in the late 1800s, where the air is thick with sea breeze and royal dignity. The sky, as usual, can't decide if it's going to cry or dazzle you. Rain clouds lurk in the distance like nosy aunties. You're dressed entirely wrong, by the way. Too many layers. And those boots? Absolutely not. But none of that matters because today you've got one simple task. Follow Queen Liliuokalani, the last monarch of Hawaii, through the most dignified, melodic, and politely rebellious tale a kingdom has ever told. She's not your average queen. She writes hauntingly beautiful songs, serves pineapple with military precision, and recently, yes, banned umbrellas from her royal court. Why? That's part of what you'll uncover. But let's just say, if you show up twirling a parasol during a rainstorm, you'll be firmly asked to, please enjoy the weather like a Hawaiian. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint into the gray-blue shimmer of morning light as Queen Liliuokalani, still called Lydia by those closest to her, adjusts her lace collar and glances toward the ocean. A drizzle begins, not enough to drench, just enough to make the stone steps look like melted glass. Around you, the palms barely move. In Hawaii, even the trees know how to stay relaxed. Nearby, a nervous aide sneaks out an umbrella. Big mistake. The queen gives him a look that could curdle milk. He folds it away quickly, stammering about sunstroke, which is even less convincing in this weather. You're still getting your bearings. The palace itself isn't some medieval stone monstrosity. It's bright, full of verandas and crown moldings, a little French, a little Victorian, and a lot Hawaiian. It has gaslight fixtures, porcelain floors, and creaky fans that turn slower than a canoe in mud. Historians still argue whether the Queen's infamous umbrella ban was mostly about protocol or personal symbolism. Some say she simply hated the look, umbrellas bobbing above heads like mushrooms in a taro field. Others suggest it was a statement, don't hide from the land. This is your place. Get rained on once in a while. You trail behind as she steps carefully through the corridor, humming under her breath. She always hums. Melodies float from her lips like they're trying to find a place to rest. You can't quite name the tune, but it sounds both royal and restless. Liliuokalani didn't want to be queen, not really. Her brother, King Kalakaua, wore that burden with more flamboyance, satin sashes, diplomatic drama, global tours. But Lydia, she was thoughtful, observant, and composed in every sense of the word. And she composed. Boy, did she compose. Over 160 songs, some romantic, others deeply political if you knew where to listen. Aloha Ooh is just the tip of the iceberg. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, you've got a notepad tucked into your waistband. Yes, this alternate reality provides cargo sarongs. And your task is to shadow the queen quietly. Observe, absorb, and try not to spill royal tea. Outside, the royal garden is blooming riotously. Birds of paradise, hibiscus, and tea leaves rustle like gossiping courtiers. You pass a fountain shaped like a sea turtle and a pair of royal guards who look like they've never smiled, not even at luau's. The queen walks slowly, greeting each gardener by name. She asks one about his mother's recovery from the flu, another about his nephew's schooling. She never forgets. This woman, you realize, governs like a grandmother and strategizes like a chess master. A soaked, symphonic chess master. You round a bend near the banyan tree, the one you'll come back to later, where love letters were burned and secrets whispered. But today, it's just watching you with its million tangled arms. A flock of foreign diplomats arrives, flustered and overdressed. One of them, an American with a reddish beard and the posture of someone used to yelling at waiters, pulls out a gleaming umbrella. You wince. The Queen smiles politely and gestures toward the palace with a single raised eyebrow. He hesitates, then quickly tosses the umbrella to an aide, who fumbles it like a hot coconut. You can't help but smirk. She didn't even have to say a word. That's Liliuokalani's real power. She doesn't need a throne made of gold or a battalion of soldiers. She has eyebrows and songs. A gentle moment follows. Rain dapples the stone path, drumming like fingers on a pahu drum. A breeze stirs the ginger blossoms. The Queen turns to you, noticing your soaked shoulders. "No umbrella," she says, faintly amused. You shake your head. Didn't want to be escorted out of the garden. She laughs, and it's the kind of laugh that belongs on a record player. Slow, warm, slightly melancholy. Then she walks on. Trailing her music behind her like mist. You wake up the next morning in a room with slatted windows and sheets that smell faintly of gardenia. The sea hums softly in the distance, as if it too is taking its time. Today, you're going back, way back, to the days before Lydia Kamakaeha became Queen Liliuokalani. Back when she was just a curious little girl sneaking guava from the royal pantry and mastering the art of dignified daydreaming. It's the 1840s, and you're no longer in a palace. You're inside a traditional hei pili, a thatched roof house built for air, not walls. Lydia's family belongs to the ali'i class, the hereditary nobility of the Hawaiian kingdom, and her birth, like every ali'i child, is considered sacred. You crouch beside a small woven mat as she toddles across it, chasing a lizard with the kind of focused determination you normally reserve for remote controls. From early on, her life is split between worlds, the deeply spiritual, land-rooted rhythms of native Hawaiian culture and the encroaching formalities of Western influence, with its boots, bonnets, and alarm clocks. You watch her sit quietly during morning prayers in English, then burst into giggles during hula lessons taught by her auntie, all hip sway and mischief. Historians still argue whether Lydia's upbringing was more traditional or more Western. Most agree it was a calibrated mix. She was adopted through the Hanai tradition, raised by another high-ranking family who taught her court protocol, diplomacy, and the dangerous power of silence. You follow her through her early lessons, music theory on a battered piano shipped from Boston, scripture recitations that make her yawn, and poetry classes where she writes her first lines about the sea. You notice how her eyes light up when her teacher mentioned Queen Victoria, not for the fashion or the power, but because the British Queen wrote journal entries. Lydia, even at 12, understands that to write your thoughts is to keep part of yourself from being erased. Outside, Honolulu is slowly transforming. Traders, missionaries, and foreign merchants shuffle through the streets, puffing cigars and scribbling profit margins. The ali'i still hold court, but you can see the cracks forming. Each sugar shipment, another small surrender. Lydia sees it too. You catch her watching a missionary woman scold a Hawaiian girl for dancing hula and muttering, "What a strange way to love someone, by erasing them." One of her favorite things, you learn, is listening to the old kahuna storytellers in the evening. You sit next to her on a woven mat as an elder, skin like tattooed leather, chants the origins of the islands. Mo'olelo, flow like lava, hot, ancient, and slow. It's in these moments that Lydia learns how to hold silence, not the awkward kind, but the sacred stillness of listening. She whispers to you one evening, "Sometimes you don't need to win an argument, you just need to outlive it." You can't help but grin. The girl's already preparing to become a queen without knowing it. One afternoon, the sky opens in a sudden downpour, tropical, musical rain that taps the rooftops like 1,000 fingers. You and Lydia run for shelter beneath a broad-leafed tea plant. She doesn't mind getting wet. In fact, she laughs, lifts her face to the sky, and lets the rain soak her hair until it sticks to her cheeks. The tea plant, bent under the weight of droplets, does its best to help. "I like rain," she says. "It means the gods haven't forgotten us." You make a mental note. This is not your average noble teenager. She isn't preoccupied with jewels or gossip, though she does keep a journal titled "Things I Wish Grown Men Would Stop Saying." It's mostly full of awkward missionary quotes and notes about old British wigs. She's 17 now, and you're helping her prepare for a reception. She chooses a simple holoku dress, modest but regal. She declines a bonnet, thank you very much. Her musical talent is blossoming. She can already sight read faster than you can boil water. And she's composing, too, small melodies with heavy names like He Mele Lahui Hawaii, a song for the Hawaiian nation. Nothing she writes is casual. Her brother Kalakaua is the charming one, the peacock. Lydia, she's the steel backbone. She says what he cannot, feels what he won't. And when he starts getting political, hinting at kingship, poking at Western alliances, she listens quietly and writes verses about sorrow, disguised as rainstorms. You're at a bee picnic one afternoon when a missionary school teacher asks Lydia what she thinks her role is as a young lady of noble birth. She chews her mangoes slowly, wipes her fingers, and says, "To remember what everyone else forgets." Then she walks away. That night you sit with her as she writes by lamplight. Her handwriting is looping, careful. She writes about the wind off the Ku'olau Mountains, about the sadness in her mother's eyes, and about the quiet ache she feels whenever English words try to replace Hawaiian ones. You're half asleep when she looks over and asks, "Do you think a song can hold a person together?" You nod. The next morning, you wake up to roosters and the scent of steamed taro. Lydia is already gone, out walking barefoot across the dewy grass, composing something under her breath. You hear only the last line as it disappears into the breeze. Aloha oe. You're not exactly sure when it happens, but somewhere between the second royal breakfast and a heated discussion about shipping tariffs, the Hawaiian kingdom starts to look tired. You're in your early 20s now. Well, you're traveling through time with the queen, so age is flexible, and you've become a fixture at court. You know where the good coconut pudding is hidden and which minister snores during budget meetings. But the big topic around the palace? Constitutions. Again. It's the 1860s, and Hawaii has developed a strange obsession with rewriting its own laws. King Kamehameha III had drafted the first major constitution decades earlier, blending Hawaiian governance with Western-style rule of law. It was a noble effort to protect the kingdom's independence. But lately, every constitution seems to come with more foreign fingerprints. You find yourself in a long, airy chamber lined with portraits. Lydia Kamakaeha, no longer just a girl in hula skirts, now sits in formal attire, her expression elegant and just slightly annoyed. A royal council is arguing in circles. The sugar barons want looser trade agreements with America. The native ali'i want the crown lands untouched. And someone keeps bringing up a clause about property qualifications for voting. Spoiler, it's about keeping power out of native Hawaiian hands. Historians still argue whether the Hawaiian kingdom's constitutional obsession was a sign of adaptability or desperation. What's clear to you, watching from your woven stool, is that the government has become a tug-of-war between monarchy and money. King Kalakaua has taken the throne now, Lydia's brother, full of flair, ambition, and a penchant for French wine. He's built Iolani Palace, installed electric lighting, and declared himself the Merry Monarch. His reign is a dizzying swirl of progress and politicking. He wants to revive Hawaiian traditions and simultaneously be respected by Western powers. Sometimes those goals collide, like surfboards at Waikiki. You're present during one of Kalakaua's infamous Cabinet meetings. Half the room smells like sugar plantations, the other half like ceremonial flower garlands. Lydia watches quietly from the corner, wearing a modest dress and the kind of face that says, "I'll remember all of this." Someone proposes limiting the monarch's power for stability. Another says the Americans might not recognize Hawaii's sovereignty unless the government becomes more like theirs. You resist the urge to throw a pineapple at someone. Lydia takes notes, always notes. Later that evening, you peek at her pages. She's written, "If they fear our difference, they will legislate our disappearance." The 1887 Bayonet Constitution hits like a hammer. Under threat of force, yes, literal bayonets, King Kalakaua signs a document that strips the monarchy of most power and limits voting rights to wealthy landowners, most of them white businessmen. You watch from a hallway as he signs, shoulders hunched, ink smudging. He doesn't look like a king. He looks like a man who just gave away the ocean and got a pebble in return. Lydia is furious, though she says little. She's already composing her protest, not in speeches, but in song. You hear her late at night playing a slow, minor-key lullaby that sounds like it's trying not to cry. You ask her why she doesn't just shout. She looks at you with gentle pity. Shouting is easy. Writing something they'll remember for 100 years? That's harder. Some time passes. You attend gala balls, where American advisors drink too much gin and mispronounce Hawaiian names. You help Lydia untangle diplomatic cables from London, try on ill-fitting corsets for a state dinner, and attend a rather tense performance of hula staged for foreign dignitaries, who still don't quite know whether to clap. One evening, under the orange glow of oil lamps, Lydia turns to you and says, "A kingdom is not just land, it's memory." That sticks with you. She begins to write more publicly now, letters, essays, and lyrics that blend patriotism with heartache. You begin to sense that the palace is less fortress, more performance space. The monarchy is still here, yes, but it's increasingly ceremonial. The real power, That's slipping away into ledgers and trade agreements. One day, the rain returns. A sudden downpour during a ceremonial march leaves several officials scrambling for umbrellas. A few even pull out absurd top-hat rain shields. Lydia, walking bareheaded, offers a tight-lipped smile. You glance around. Not one member of the native Hawaiian delegation carries an umbrella, just soaked, smiling dignity. Later, she proposes a new court guideline. Umbrellas are no longer to be used in formal processions or inside royal grounds. The foreign ministers grumble. She shrugs. She says, it's not a law, it's a preference, like poetry over shouting. Of course, people gossip. Queen bans umbrellas, makes the papers, and snide cartoons appear in Honolulu gazettes. You save one. It shows her holding a soaked crown like a wet sponge. You ask her if she minds. She shakes her head. She says, let them draw. I'll compose. That night, she writes what will become one of her more obscure songs, Ka Ua Loku, pouring rain. It's not just about weather, it's about resilience. So here you are, drenched again, walking behind a queen who is slowly, silently preparing to carry the full weight of a kingdom no one wants her to rule. You're on a boat now, and it's rocking just enough to make your stomach question every decision you've made since breakfast. There's a fresh wind snapping up the sails, and you're clutching a trunk full of formal gowns and dried salted fish. The queen, or rather the soon-to-be queen, is standing beside you in an elegant travel coat, her gloves pristine, her expression somewhere between regal poise and seasick resolve. It's 1887, and Liliuokalani is sailing to London for Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. This is no pleasure cruise. It's diplomacy with a side of corset suffocation. She's not just attending as a guest, she's representing a tiny island kingdom at a party full of empires. And you, somehow, have been promoted to official note-taker, tea fetcher, and person who must catch her tiara if it flies off. As you pass under gray clouds and through harbors, thick with industrial smoke, Lydia Kamakaeha doesn't flinch. She has a way of being still, even in motion. It's unnerving and oddly comforting, like watching a volcano nap. By the time you arrive in London, you're layered in wool and shamefully underwhelmed by the English sun. Liliuokalani, on the other hand, has transformed. She floats into banquets like an aria in velvet. Her Hawaiian gowns draw stares. Her posture draws admiration. Even the British papers, notorious for snobbery, describe her as noble, composed, and of musical inclination. Historians still argue whether this trip was more symbolic than strategic. Some say Kalakaua original vision, sending envoys to strengthen Hawaii's standing with world powers, had lost steam. Others argue it was a bold reassertion of Hawaiian sovereignty in an increasingly hostile world. But what's undeniable is this. Liliuokalani took up the mission with quiet defiance. You tag along through damp streets and chilly receptions. She meets diplomats, artists, even Queen Victoria herself. There's a moment, blink and you'll miss it, when the two queens lock eyes. One aging and draped in mourning black, the other younger but already mourning something no one else seems to notice. You lean toward Liliuokalani afterward and ask what they talked about. Rain, she says simply, and the difficulty of ruling over men who think they know better. That night she writes in her diary, "You peak, you always peak. Though far from my islands, I carry their fragrance within me." But not all receptions are warm. In Paris, a minor baron asks her how such a small nation could possibly matter. She answers with a smile and a single line, Have you ever tried to ignore a mosquito in your bedchamber? You nearly dropped the wine tray. Still, the homesickness is real. You catch her humming in stairwells, fingering the edge of her locket, staring at maps with longing. She misses Hawaii's heat, the scent of breadfruit on the breeze, and the easy way people back home laugh with their whole bodies. You try to cheer her up by preparing a proper Hawaiian breakfast. It turns into a spectacular disaster: burnt fish, soggy poi, and tea that tastes like regret. She eats it anyway, smiling. The effort tastes better than the food, she tells you kindly. Back in London, as the Jubilee fanfare reaches its peak, Liliuokalani writes again. This time it's a melancholy tune, soft, slow, built on a repeated refrain. You can tell it's the early bones of something important. She doesn't name it yet, but you hum it days later under your breath, not knowing that in the years to come, the world will call it Aloha Oi. The pageantry ends. There's a formal photograph of her seated among rows of monarchs and nobility. She looks elegant, yes, but also distant. Her smile is professional. Her eyes are elsewhere. Maybe home, maybe the future. The return voyage is quiet. The ocean rocks gently, and she sits with her journal, scribbling furiously. You lie beside her on the deck one evening, the stars stretching out like ancient fish hooks across the sky. She turns to you and whispers, "Empires think they last forever, but so do tides." When you finally spot the peaks of Oahu on the horizon, something in her posture relaxes. Not all the way, but enough. She's home, and she's different. And so are you. The palace smells like plumeria again. There's salt on the wind, and the torches crackle with lazy defiance. But something has shifted. King Kalakaua looks older, tired. His health is failing, and his grip on the throne feels weaker. The political sharks are circling, slick in suits and smelling of sweetened rum and sugar contracts. You assist the queen with unpacking, and find, tucked between her gloves and lace, a small carved figure wrapped in kapa cloth, a gift from a kapuna in London. For protection, he had said. She places it by her bedside. You ask her what she thinks of her journey. She thinks for a long moment, then says, "They will never give us respect. We have to build it and wear it like a second skin." She resumes her royal duties immediately: banquets, councils, endless paperwork. But now she's seen the gears behind the curtain. She's seen the palaces of the world, and none of them compared to the land that raised her. She's more certain than ever that Hawaii doesn't need to become something else to matter. One morning, she tells you plainly, "If they take the throne from me, they'll still have to answer to my music." That afternoon, she sits at the palace piano, you beside her with sheet music and a glass of lilikoi juice. She begins to play, soft and deliberate. And just like that, you're home. It begins with a quiet funeral. The bells toll, low and long across the morning air, and you feel the vibration through the soles of your shoes. King Kalakaua has died. January 1891. He passed away in San Francisco, thousands of miles from home, under the dim glow of gas lamps and the attentive eyes of American physicians. His body, now returned to Honolulu, lies in state in a palace that smells of fresh maili and old sorrow. You stand beside Liliuokalani as she receives guests, nobility, missionaries, foreign diplomats, all offering condolences wrapped in political undertones. Her face is unreadable, dignified. You've learned to recognize the set of her jaw, that subtle tension that means grief is being tucked neatly beneath protocol. The transition is swift. There's little time for mourning. As her brother's heir, Liliuokalani is named queen the very next day. You help her into the ceremonial black gown, stiff, hot, and impossibly heavy. She fastens a brooch at her throat, then pauses. "This," she murmurs, "is not the crown I wanted, but it's the one I must wear." Historians still argue whether she ever truly sought power. Some say she was reluctant, others believe she was determined from the beginning. But standing beside her now, as she ascends the throne, you feel the resolve settle into her like stone into deep water. The crowd outside the palace is quiet, respectful, a mix of faces, Hawaiian, Chinese, Portuguese, American. You spot a few people holding umbrellas, but none dare open them. Rain or not, the Queen's preferences are known. Today the sky cooperates, overcast but dry. As she steps forward to address the people, the hush is near sacred. Her voice, steady, melodic, speaks of loyalty, unity, and the kuleana, responsibility, of leadership. No thunder, no pomp, just words that drop like pebbles into the collective heart of her nation. You retreat with her after the ceremony to the blue room, where gifts have been piled haphazardly, leis, scrolls, hand-carved bowls, and a particularly awkward oil painting of a pineapple. She sits in the high-backed chair and closes her eyes. "I am now the last," she says softly, "the last to sit here and still believe the monarchy can survive." The months that follow are a blur of ceremonies, negotiations, and ceremonial sashes. You help her draft royal proclamations, and once chased down a parrot that had escaped during a garden reception. Even queens need assistants who can climb trees in formal wear. But the joy doesn't last. The pressure mounts almost immediately. The bayonet constitution still hangs over everything like a mosquito net full of holes. Liliuokalani wants to restore the power of the monarchy, to give native Hawaiians a stronger voice in their own land. Her advisors, many of them native-born, agree. Her cabinet, mixed at best. The sugar barons, not amused. One council meeting stretches for 6 hours. You sneak her bits of guava bread under the table, like you're feeding a royal squirrel. She thanks you with a wink. "These men debate while the ocean waits," she whispers. You begin to see her loneliness creeping in at the edges. Her late-night walks in the garden become more frequent. You follow at a respectful distance, watching her gaze drift toward the sea. She listens to the wind, as if it's trying to give her advice. She writes more now. Songs, letters, quiet appeals. One day you find her at the piano composing a melancholy piece with sharp, deliberate notes. "This one," she tells you, "is for the ones who will forget. I want the music to remind them." You help her smuggle a revised constitution draft through the palace corridors. It's not a coup, it's a correction. She wants to give voting rights back to her people, remove the absurd property clauses, reclaim some royal power, and reset the balance. But word leaks. As always, someone talks. The American minister, whose mustache seems to twitch whenever the Queen speaks, becomes alarmed. He begins whispering into the ears of business owners, missionaries, and military commanders. "She's unstable," they say. "She'll ruin trade. We need protection." You hear them. You pass them in the streets and smile politely, but your stomach churns. One evening, a newspaper headline catches your eye. Rumors of a royal power grab. It isn't subtle. Liliuokalani is furious. Not with the people, not even with the press, but with the betrayal. They call it a power grab when I try to restore what was stolen. But when they rewrite laws with guns in their hands, they call it business. You sit with her late into the night, listening as she plays yet another unfinished song. This one has no lyrics yet, just a sorrowful, unresolved melody. She stops mid-note and looks at you. Do you think they'd take the throne from a man this easily? You don't answer. You don't have to. The next day, she drafts a final version of her proposed constitution. She doesn't shout. She doesn't march. She simply writes it down, folds it into an envelope, and says, "Let them come." Outside, clouds gather. Not rain, not yet. Just that same ominous hush. The kind you felt right before Kalakaua died. The kind that tells you something is about to break. But for now, she stands tall. Her voice calm, her hands still. The Queen has arisen, and she will not bow. There's something unsettling about how quietly a coup can begin. You'd expect shouting, maybe cannon fire, perhaps a dramatic trumpet or two. But on that January morning in 1893, the only sound is the crunch of boots on gravel and the low thump of tension. You're sipping kava in the palace kitchen when someone rushes in, face pale. "They've landed," he says. You run upstairs, nearly colliding with a footman holding a basket of Lays, ridiculously out of place now. From a balcony, you see it. A detachment of U.S. Marines disembarking from the USS Boston, uniforms crisp, rifles slung. They move with the kind of practiced calm that says, "Don't worry, we've done this before." You find Liliuokalani in her office, writing, still writing. She doesn't even look up. She says, "I know. They've come for what they were always circling." Historians still argue whether the Marines came to protect American lives or to support the overthrow. But from your vantage point, right next to a queen whose nation is being peeled out from under her like a taro leaf from hot earth, the truth is as clear as the ocean. This is not a rescue mission. It's a takeover. Outside, a group of businessmen and political opportunists, calling themselves the Committee of Safety, an absurd name considering the danger they bring, declare a provisional government. They do this with no vote, no mandate, and no shame. They read their proclamation from a balcony with the kind of tone you usually reserve for announcing lunch specials. Liliuokalani, calm as ever, refuses to respond in kind. There will be no bloodshed on her watch. She says, "I am committed to nonviolence. My people shall not die for greed wrapped in legality." She drafts a formal protest. You help deliver it to the American minister. The parchment is warm in your hand, like something living. You're tempted to shout, to knock over a lamp, to grab someone by the lapels and say, "She is still your queen." But you don't, because she doesn't. Instead, she says, "If I must step down to protect them, I will. But I will not surrender my claim." And so she signs the document, temporarily yielding authority to the United States of America, until such time as justice might be restored. It is perhaps one of the most graceful gut punches in history. The palace grows quieter. Servants still sweep the halls, but they move like ghosts. You walk through rooms that feel both regal and robbed. The throne room, once full of music and diplomacy, now hosts awkward silence and half-finished tea. No one knows what to do with themselves. And then the most surreal thing happens. Tourists start showing up. Yes, real floppy-hatted, camera-wielding tourists. They arrive in carriages, asking if the Queen is doing autographs or if there are snacks. One woman tries to sit on the throne. You stop her by accidentally dropping a palm frond on her head. Liliuokalani, ever the diplomat, allows some visitors in. She greets them with dignity, answers their questions, even gives one child a flower from the royal garden. But you see it in her eyes, the tight, watchful sadness of someone hosting strangers in her own home. One evening, you sit together in the garden. The moon is high, the stars blink slowly, as if unsure how to look down. She's holding a ukulele, plucking out an early version of a song you haven't heard before. It doesn't have lyrics yet, just soft, rising chords that tug at your chest like a forgotten lullaby. You know, she says, they think this place is theirs now. They walk across it like it's conquered. She pauses. But they can't hear the songs, not really. They don't know which winds are ancestors and which ones are warnings, and they never will. The next day, the provisional government takes over completely. The Hawaiian flag is pulled down, the American flag is raised. You watch it happen, standing beside her, and feel a heat rise in your chest that even the breeze can't cool. She doesn't cry. She doesn't flinch. She just turns away and hums something you don't recognize. Later, you help her sort through official documents. Her name scratched out here, her title removed there. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. She calls it bureaucratic erasure. You call it theft with a pen. Yet even now, she writes. She writes music, letters to U.S. presidents, statements for the Hawaiian people. One evening, she composes a new anthem, not Aloha Oi, not yet. This one is different, fiercer, yet mournful. She sings it in a low voice, just above a whisper, and it sounds like heartbreak taught itself to dance. You ask her why she still writes. She says, because if they take everything else, they'll still have to hum when the rain falls. And when they do, they'll sing my melody. Every evening, more supporters come to the palace gate. Some bring flowers, others chant softly. One woman brings a bowl of boy and leaves it on the steps with a single note. For the Queen, from her people. You place it on the kitchen shelf, and it stays there for weeks, untouched, turning slowly sour, like the moment you're living through. But the Queen, she remains. She rises with the sun, speaks kindly to guests, and never once forgets the name of a child brought to see her. The kingdom may be provisionally governed, but she is still queen to everyone who remembers what real aloha feels like. You keep waiting for her to fall apart. She never does. The rain comes back, just as you suspected it would. It returns in heavy sheets one morning, pouring over the palace grounds like a quiet act of solidarity. You're standing barefoot in the courtyard, soaked to the bone, when a servant rushes out with an umbrella. You grab his wrist. Don't. He pauses, looks at the sky, then at the Queen, who is already walking calmly into the garden, no cover, her hair pinned back, her dress darkening slowly with every falling drop. No umbrella. Not now. Not ever. This is not some stubborn rule. This is theater, memory, and protest wrapped into one defiant act. The umbrella ban, which you once thought mildly eccentric, now seems sacred. This isn't about fashion. It's about refusing to hide from what's real. Inside the palace, word has spread. The queen has written something, a new document, a song, both. You find her at her writing desk, which now doubles as a music station, constitution incubator, and polite correspondence battlefield. She's just finished a new composition, a song called He Inoa no Kaiolani, a tribute to her niece. It's gentle but not weak, full of expectation and hope in a future most people have stopped believing in. Historians still debate the political purpose of these songs. Were they coded messages to the Hawaiian people? Mourning rituals? Catharsis set to melody? The answer, of course, is yes, to all of the above. You help her arrange sheet music. Outside, another small crowd has gathered at the palace gates. No one is shouting, no one holds signs. They just stand quietly in the rain, some holding flowers, some wearing their finest lauhala hats, all waiting to see if the queen will come to the window. She does. No speech, no wave, just her silhouette behind gauze curtains, hands clasped together. One man whispers, "Still our queen." Another says, "She's the only one who doesn't look wet." The provisional government hates this. Every silent act of dignity undermines their authority. They're trying to get rid of a monarchy, and she keeps acting like it still exists. Because for the people, it does. The American minister begins pressing harder. There are rumors now, rumors of annexation. You start hearing words like treaty, annex, protectorate. Each one makes your stomach twist like a poorly wrapped laulau. The queen says little, but she watches closely. She always watches. Then one day, they strike. January 1895. A group of royalists attempts a counter-rebellion. They are disorganized, passionate, and very poorly armed. The uprising fails quickly. The provisional government, now calling itself the Republic of Hawaii, panics. They arrest dozens of suspects, some guilty of little more than owning old royal banners. And they arrest Liliuokalani. No trial, no hearing, just soldiers in boots, a few hastily signed papers, and a cold walk from her bedroom to a small upstairs room in her own palace. You're with her. You help pack the essentials. She takes very little. A Bible, a pen, a bundle of sheet music, one hairbrush. She doesn't cry, but she does look at the piano once, just once, and then turns away. Room they give her is Spartan, white walls, barred windows, and a mattress too thin for comfort. You're permitted to bring her meals, which you do, 3 times a day, often with an extra flower tucked under the napkin. Once she leaves you a folded napkin in return, with a single line written on it. I was born to serve, not to surrender. She is under what they call house arrest, but it is closer to house exile. Armed guards sit outside. Ministers squabble over what to do with her. And she writes. Of course she writes. Songs mostly. Over 50 during this time. Some short, some unfinished. All of them soaked in memory. Some are quiet rebellions. Others are lullabies. lullabies for a homeland being stolen inch by inch. One of the most famous, Heike Aloha o Kahaku, the Queen's Prayer, is composed during this imprisonment. She writes it as a prayer for mercy and peace. It is not bitter, it is not angry, it is a song of grace in the face of theft. One night after a thunderstorm, you sneak into her room with a tray of tea and a new pencil. She's sitting by the window, her face lit by candlelight. She says, "They want a queen who cries." You say nothing. She says, "But I will only cry in verse." Downstairs, the Republic holds meetings trying to decide what to do with her. Should she be exiled, tried, publicly disgraced? You wish they'd listen to her music, but of course they don't. The umbrella rule still stands unofficially. No one dares bring one near her window, not even when rain floods the eaves. One guard even shrugs off his own coat during a downpour, choosing to get soaked rather than offend her silent decree. And slowly something strange happens. You start to realize that the Queen isn't just surviving, she's performing. Every graceful refusal, every sad song, every step she takes through the halls of her captivity is an act of cultural endurance. She's writing her people a script on how to be conquered without becoming small. And you're the stagehand. The Queen of Hawaii, deposed and confined to one wing of her own palace, composes through grief. She writes for a nation that no longer officially exists, but refuses to vanish. And you think to yourself, this is how you outlive an empire, with song, and rain, and absolutely no umbrellas. Some prisons don't need bars. You find yourself spending more time in the Queen's chamber now, though no one calls it that aloud. Officially, it's just the upstairs suite. Unofficially, it's still hers. The walls are bare, the bed is plain, but her presence is undeniable. She carries herself like she's still sitting on a throne, because in a way, she is. She rises early, dresses herself meticulously, and begins her morning by writing at a small table beneath the east-facing window. The sun warms the whitewashed walls. You bring her tea, strong and slightly oversteeped. She never complains. She sets the cup down without looking up. "The ink today feels slow," she says. Perhaps it knows what I'm writing. What she's writing, again, is music. And this time, it's Aloha Oe. You've heard pieces of it before. She's been carrying the melody in her head for years, humming it during carriage rides and late-night garden walks. But now, confined to this small space, she writes it all down. Lyrics, harmonies, dynamics. It comes out like breath she's been holding for far too long. You sit beside her as she writes, watching her lips move as she tests the words. A fond embrace ere I depart. It's a goodbye, and not just one. It's a farewell to a lover, to a people, to a kingdom, each note layered with grief and grace. She tells you the story of the melody, inspired by a visit to Manawili, where she saw two lovers parting under a shady tree, arms reluctantly letting go. But of course, that's only part of the truth. Historians still debate whether Aloha Oe was meant as a personal farewell or a political lament. Many believe it came both over time. A melody that started in private ends up woven into the soul of a nation, sung at weddings, whispered at funerals, played by slack key guitars on distant shores. Even the enemies who tried to erase her end up humming it. One afternoon, you find her at the piano. She gestures for you to sit. Then, softly, she begins to play. Her voice is clear, calm, so calm it makes you want to cry. Until we meet again. When she finishes, there's silence. A silence so full it feels like thunder pressed between velvet pillows. I never imagined it would leave these walls, she says. It won't just leave the walls, you think. It will outlive them. Outside, the guards shift uncomfortably. You see one younger soldier dab his eyes. Maybe it's the dust. Maybe not. Later, she begins collecting her songs, writing them down carefully in long, looping script. She stores them in folders not marked by title, but by feeling. Hopeful, mournful, for the girls, for the wind. You organize them, trying not to read too closely. Each lyric feels like peeking into someone's most vulnerable memory. One rainy night, she hands you a tiny leather-bound notebook. She says, "Keep this. Not for me, for later." You open it. Inside are fragments, ideas, half lyrics, bits of memory. One page reads simply, "If you must leave, leave gently. Do not let the sand know you've gone." It's almost unbearable. There's something else too, a different kind of writing. Speeches, maybe. You see her revising a formal petition, an appeal to the United States Congress, asking them to reject the annexation treaty. She's collecting signatures from her people who still believe she is their rightful monarch. Tens of thousands of names. You help coordinate the messengers, quiet, careful, often barefoot. They fan out across the islands, carrying nothing but dignity and pens. It becomes known as the Kauai petition. And even though she's imprisoned, the people still come. Old women with hands like taro leaves, young fishermen with sea salt in their hair, school teachers and aunties and laymakers, all signing, all saying no. This, too, is her music. One night she invites you to sit by the window with her. She's working on another song, this one more upbeat, a tribute to the kaona, the hidden meanings in Hawaiian poetry. She says, "The outside world hears only the melody, but those who know will hear the truth underneath." You ask what she means. She grins. Every song is a smuggled message. You laugh softly, then ask, "They know?" She shrugs. "I don't care if they know. I care if they feel it." And they do. Even those who came to take everything feel it, though they don't know why their throats tighten when her music plays. One of the guards, a man named Silas, tall, sunburned, and obviously from Boston, begins requesting songs. At first, awkwardly. That sad one, the one with the goodbye. You suspect he hums Aloha Oe under his breath when he thinks no one's listening. Liliu Kalani notices. "That's the magic," she says one morning as you pluck taro leaves for lunch. Even those who think they've won end up singing the songs of the ones they conquered. You pause. Does that feel like justice? She thinks. No, but it feels like survival. The rain tapers off. A small rainbow hovers near the mountains. The air smells green again. The Queen sits at her writing desk, pen moving gently, ink gliding like a canoe across calm waters. She doesn't speak. She writes. And the kingdom, though bruised and officially gone, breathes between the lines. You wake to the sound of boots on tile. Not hurried, not storming, just the determined rhythm of change arriving. You slip your feet into sandals and hurry toward the Queen's chamber, heart tapping like a pahu drum. When you arrive, she's already dressed, already seated, already waiting. The Americans have made up their minds, she says, before you ask. Her voice is soft, but not soft like weakness, soft like the kind of wind that erodes cliffs over time. Annexation is coming. It's 1898, and the United States is busy with its war in the Philippines, its military flexing in Cuba, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Empires are the fashion now, and Hawaii, strategically floating in the Pacific, rich with sugar, pineapple, and perfect naval access is no longer a curiosity, it's a target. Historians still argue about the motivations. Was Hawaii annexed for its resources, its military value, its racial makeup, or lack thereof? But in the end, those arguments matter far less than the document that arrives under official seal, the Newlands Resolution, passed not as a treaty, which would have required 2/3 Senate approval and likely failed, but as a simple joint resolution. You help the Queen into her shawl as she prepares to walk through the garden. The air is quiet. The trees bow slightly, as if in mourning. You both know what's happened. The Kingdom of Hawaii, once sovereign, once proud, is now declared a territory of the United States. No vote, no ceremony, just paperwork and silence. In the street, people gather, not to celebrate, to sit, to hold hands, to look at the palace and remember what it once was. Someone begins to sing softly, Aloha Oe. Another joins in. You do too. The Queen does not stop them. They've taken the land, but not the echo, she says. You escort her back inside. The guards are gone now. Her official imprisonment ended years ago, but the weight never left. She's been moving through her own palace like a ghost with unfinished business. At lunch, she only eats a little poi and one slice of roasted banana. Her appetite comes and goes these days. Her strength, too. That afternoon she receives visitors, quiet supporters, descendants of Alii, and a few foreign guests, still unsure whether to call her Your Majesty or Mrs. Dominus. She accepts both titles with the same calm, but you can tell which one fits. A group of school children arrives with leis. They present them in shy hands, staring at the Queen like she stepped from a storybook. She accepts each one, bending slightly to meet them at eye level. One little girl, eyes full of question, whispers, "Are you still Queen?" Liliuokalani smiles, presses a flower behind the girl's ear, and says, "Only to those who remember." You excuse yourself after that, because something in your chest feels tight and salty. You find a corner near the music room and exhale slowly. When you return, she's already writing again. This time it's not a song, it's a will. She begins bequeathing her personal lands and estates to support Hawaiian children, orphans especially, education, cultural programs. Let them grow up knowing who they are. Let them never think they must become something else to matter. She leaves no children of her own, none that lived, but she speaks of the Hawaiian people as her children, always has. You help draft the clauses. It's painful but precise work. At one point, she pauses and adds a line in Hawaiian that loosely translates to, "My love is the land, and my legacy is the hands that till it." You know she means it. Outside, the newspaper boys are shouting headlines. Hawaii becomes U.S. territory. Glory for the stars and stripes. The press is filled with optimism, opportunity, and not a whisper of regret. But inside the palace, there is only quiet resistance. You help the queen sort through her keepsakes. There's an old shell lei from Kalakaua, a Bible with margins filled by hand. The little notebook she once gave you, filled now, every page inked. You find tucked between its last pages the original lyrics to He Mele La Hui Hawaii, her national anthem from days before all this. You trace your fingers across the faded lines. One evening, after most of the staff have gone, you hear her singing again, something soft, nearly inaudible, a half-hummed lullaby for a nation that's been put to sleep. You sit beside her and hum along, not knowing the words, but understanding all the same. Later that night, you walk the palace one last time. The throne room is empty, the flags are gone, but the breeze still carries plumeria and sea salt, and somewhere far off someone is playing a ukulele. Just a few chords. It's almost enough. You return to her side. She's seated at her piano, eyes closed, fingers resting lightly on the keys. She turns to you and asks, "What happens when the song ends?" You don't know. But she smiles anyway. She says, "It never ends. It just changes key." And the melody begins again. You never get used to how quiet the palace feels now. No guards, no dignitaries, no parade of ministers rattling teacups while proposing compromises no one believes in. Instead, there's just the echo of sandals on polished koa floors and the creak of ceiling fans turning slowly, like they're not sure whether it's worth the effort. Liliuokalani, the former queen, now spends most mornings in the garden. She walks with a cane sometimes. Not always, only when the air is particularly heavy or her knees remember she's in her 60s. You follow at a respectful distance, a clipboard under your arm and a spare handkerchief tucked into your waistband. The hibiscus blooms with reckless enthusiasm. The ginger plants are practically showing off. The queen pauses often. At each tree, she seems to greet it. You're not imagining that. She names them sometimes. This one I planted with Kalakaua. That one on the day of Kaiulani's birthday, as if they're family members. Today she carries a satchel of cuttings and flower buds. You help her tuck each one into small muslin bags, labeled for planting elsewhere. A garden, she says, is just a song made of leaves. Historians still argue whether Liliuokalani withdrew into quiet domesticity after annexation, or whether she merely changed the theater of her resistance. What you see, day after day, is not retreat, it's rerouting. She writes letters, dozens per week, some to political figures, some to community leaders, some to children. One day she pens a long note to President McKinley, articulating, again gently, her refusal to recognize the legality of annexation. She never receives a reply. She didn't expect one. Instead, she files the letter carefully in her personal archive, beneath a folder labeled Na Mea Eha, the painful things. You help her set up a modest music salon, just a small space in the back wing of her residence, where students come to learn piano, chant, and mele. She teaches without ceremony. Her only rule: feel it before you perform it. One boy, maybe 12, tries to rush through a love song. She stops him cold. "Have you ever loved anyone?" she asks. He shakes his head. "Then play something else," she says. "Love isn't for hurrying." You bite your lip to keep from laughing. He switches to a cheerful hula tune. Much safer. There's talk now of a Haviken Civic Club. You help with logistics, arranging paper, drafting statements, collecting family genealogies for members who want to trace their lineage back to the Ali'i class. The Queen is supportive but cautious. "We can remember who we are," she says, "but we must not believe that remembering alone will return the crown." Still, she hosts meetings in her home. Community leaders gather in her parlor, sipping tea, some wearing Western suits, others in traditional pau. They speak of scholarships, of preserving Olelo Hawaii, of making sure the children grow up knowing their own stories, not just the ones printed in school books sent from Boston. One day someone brings a newspaper clipping. A new school textbook lists the Hawaiian monarchy as a temporary native government replaced for the benefit of all. The Queen reads it in silence. Then she writes a note to a local teacher thanking her for continuing to teach mele in Hawaiian. Truth, she tells you later, does not shout, it sings, and children always remember songs. She attends more funerals now. Many of her contemporaries are passing away, some old friends, some former enemies. She goes to each one she can, wearing deep black and holding a single flower. At one, she surprises everyone by embracing the widow of a former cabinet member who had once voted to reduce her power. "No use holding grudges now," she says gently. "Too much else to carry." She begins composing again, not for politics this time, but for reflection. Her newer songs are slower, heavier. Some are in minor keys. Some drift into silence before finishing, like they've forgotten where they were going. You ask her why she leaves them incomplete. Because some things stay unfinished on purpose, like hope, like justice. One afternoon, while organizing old correspondence, you find a letter from Queen Victoria's granddaughter. It's short but respectful, expressing admiration for Liliuokalani's grace during this historic transition. She folds it carefully and places it next to a faded photograph of herself and Kalakaua on their European tour. "They said we were charming," she murmurs. Charming is the word they use when they don't want to call you powerful. And she laughs. In a way, life slows. In another way, it sharpens. Every gesture, every lesson, every visitor feels more precious now. She has fewer official obligations, but more spiritual ones. She blesses children, offers quiet advice to new mothers, visits sick elders, and tells stories of her youth, not as entertainment, but as reminder. That evening, she sits with you under the plumeria tree, the one she planted on the first anniversary of the overthrow. "Would you like to hear a story?" she asks. You nod, of course. She tells you about the first time she swam in the ocean as a child, how she was frightened of the deep, how her aunt told her, The sea does not want to eat you. It only wants to know if you'll float. She smiles. The monarchy was like that. We thought we were drowning, but maybe we were just learning not to panic. You look at her, older now, softer at the edges, but unbowed. She still walks without umbrellas, still sings in the morning, still writes, and in her silence there is thunder. You're up before sunrise, as usual. The Queen has already brewed her own tea, though you always offer to help, and is sitting quietly on the lanai, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders like a memory. The sky is that pale, silvery color that only happens for about 7 minutes before the sun officially clocks in for duty. Today she seems more thoughtful than usual. You sit nearby, notebook ready, and wait. Finally, she says, "We're going to send a message across the ocean." And just like that, you're back in motion. It's 1897, and though the kingdom has been dissolved, Queen Liliuokalani is not done fighting, not by a long shot. This time it's a message in the form of signatures, petitions, thousands of them across every island. From dusty towns to remote valleys, volunteers are gathering names of native Hawaiians opposed to annexation. The effort isn't loud. It isn't fiery. It doesn't make headlines in the American press, but it's massive. You help coordinate the teams. Letters are written. Names are collected on thick paper scrolls, sometimes carried through jungle paths and over ridge lines in woven baskets. Kupuna sign with hands that tremble from age. Young men add their names boldly in sweeping script. Even some who never learned to read or write ask someone to sign for them. The answer is always aole, no. It becomes known as the Kue petition, a refusal. Historians still debate how many signatures were gathered. The most commonly cited number? 21,269. That may not seem like much today, but at the time it represented the vast majority of the native Hawaiian population, an astonishing feat considering the lack of modern infrastructure. You travel with the Queen's trusted envoys to collect the final petitions. The documents are thick, bound in string, smelling faintly of ink, sweat, and sandalwood. You help wrap them in kapa cloth and prepare them for the voyage to Washington, D.C., where a delegation of Hawaiian representatives will present them to Congress. I may not step foot there, but my people's voices will, the Queen says. And they do. In November 1897, the Kue petition arrives in Washington. It shocks senators who'd been led to believe Hawaiians supported annexation. It stuns political cartoonists. And for a moment, it works. The annexation treaty, already drafted, fails to gain the required votes in the Senate. You and the Queen listen for news on a crackling phonograph radio. When word arrives, she allows herself a rare smile. "The land said no, and they heard it," she whispers. But the celebration is short-lived. The following year, in July 1898, Congress sidesteps the failed treaty by passing the Newlands Resolution, a legislative loophole requiring only a simple majority, no vote by the Hawaiian people, no ceremony of consent, just signatures in a distant capital and the quiet theft of a nation. The Queen receives the news in the middle of tending her orchids. She doesn't shout, she doesn't weep, she simply places her garden gloves on the table and says, "They heard the no and chose the yes anyway." Still, she keeps the petitions, stored safely, cataloged, treasured, not just as protest, but as proof. One day, she says, they'll say we went quietly. These will remind them otherwise. She begins a new project, gathering her papers, her compositions, her letters, and her version of events into a proper archive. She wants the truth to last. You help categorize the material by year, by type, by tone. She labels some folders kaulana, celebrated. Others she labels hila hila, shameful. One evening she hands you a thin sheet of folded paper. She says, "Read it." It's a poem, simple, titled Kue. No is not silence. No is not surrender. No is a lay, woven from every name they tried not to hear. You tuck it into your own notebook. She asks you to accompany her on a short trip to visit some of the families who signed the petition. You go. In Hilo, she walks slowly through taro fields. In Lahaina, she sings a verse of Aloha Oe beneath a breadfruit tree. In Molokai, she holds the hand of a woman who can barely speak and simply sits with her in silence. People forget, the Queen says one night by a beachside fire, that history isn't made in capitals. It's made in kitchens and fish ponds and petition scrolls stained with rain. The next morning, someone leaves a bundle of flowers at her door. Tucked inside is a single, unsigned note, "Mahalo for not letting us be forgotten." The Queen doesn't speak for a long time after reading it. Then she folds the note carefully and places it between the pages of her prayer book. Back in Honolulu, she begins writing a memoir. It's deliberate, lyrical, unapologetic. It tells the story not just of her life, but of her land. Of a crown taken, yes, but of a people never bowed. One chapter she titles, "How We Said No." You copy the pages carefully, ensuring nothing is lost. You know deep down the Queen is not expecting a return to the throne. That part of the story has ended. But her legacy, that's what she's writing now, word by word, leaf by leaf. Each signature on the Kue petition a beat in the rhythm of a nation that still pulses beneath every song she sings. The years begin to glide by, quieter now, but no less heavy. You notice it in the way the sunlight falls differently across the veranda, in how the Queen sometimes pauses longer before sitting, how the city of Honolulu itself seems to thrum at a new, unfamiliar tempo. It's the early 1900s, and while America is galloping into the 20th century with electric streetcars and skyscrapers, Hawaii is being slowly reshaped, flattened into something useful. Useful to business, useful to war. The Queen, of course, watches it all. She doesn't resist change for its own sake, but she's suspicious of progress that forgets the past. When someone tells her the new school curriculum no longer includes Hawaiian language instruction, she simply sighs. They've confused forgetting with healing. Historians still argue whether the Queen withdrew from public life in these final decades, or whether she remained quietly influential. What you witness every day suggests the latter. The visitors haven't stopped. They've just changed shape. Now it's school teachers seeking advice, journalists asking for comment, musicians requesting permission to reprint her songs. She gives each one time. She gives each one grace. One day, a young woman arrives, awkward and overdressed, carrying a bundle of carefully folded paper. She has transcribed several of the Queen's songs by hand, in Hawaiian. She says she's trying to teach them to her students on the Big Island, but she's not sure she's doing it right. The Queen listens to her sing, politely corrects her pronunciation, then sings with her, line by line, until both are laughing, slightly off-key and totally radiant. After the visitor leaves, you help file her transcriptions. "She'll be fine," the Queen says. "She remembered to breathe between the words. That's half the battle." You notice something else too. She's receiving more letters from outside Hawaii, some from Boston, some from Black American intellectuals in the South, even one from a suffragette in London. All express admiration. One asks if she would consider visiting the mainland again to speak about her experience as a woman ruler in a colonized land. The Queen reads it carefully, then folds it and sets it aside. "I don't need to speak from their podium," she says. "I already spoke from mine." Still, she writes a reply. She always writes a reply. There's a new buzzword now: statehood. Politicians in Washington are talking about Hawaii not just as a territory, but as a potential full-fledged state. Some are excited, others wary, and many native Hawaiians are simply confused. "Statehood under whose story?" the Queen asks aloud one day as you bring her tea. You don't have an answer. Meanwhile, the sugar plantations expand. Entire families leave their ancestral lands to work fields owned by men they've never met. The Queen receives more and more letters from those who've moved to Honolulu, from those trying to keep their culture alive in tenements and boarding houses and overworked schools. She begins funding scholarships, quietly, no fanfare. She donates proceeds from her book, her music, even her modest land holdings. One of her most frequent stipulations, that recipients spend part of their studies learning in Hawaiian, not just about it. The language will survive, she tells you, but only if it feels useful. You help organize one of her music manuscripts for republication. The publishers want to simplify the chords, make it more accessible for mainland tastes. She says no, firmly. "I did not write lullabies to be forgotten by ease." Some days she's frailer, her steps smaller, her voice softer. But when she sings, even just a phrase, you can still feel the full weight of her presence. You begin to realize something. Her power didn't die with the crown. It transferred into stories, into signatures, into songs. One sunny morning, a young man with wide eyes and ink-stained fingers arrives at her home. He's part of a new movement, part cultural preservation, part political awareness, all rooted in the memory of the monarchy. He's respectful, almost nervous. He asks the Queen, "Do we have your blessing?" She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she asks him a question in Hawaiian. He answers in English. She raises one eyebrow. "Come back when you can answer me properly." 3 months later, he does. He speaks slowly, but he tries. She smiles. "Then yes," she says, "you have my blessing, and your kuleana." Later, she tells you, "I won't be here when they rise, but they will rise." One day, while sorting old letters, you find a small notebook tucked into the back of her drawer. It's dated 1893, and the cover reads simply, "Meal Nuna Po, Songs for the Nights." Inside are lullabies, never published, never sung aloud. You ask if she wants to share them now. "No," she says. "They were for the nights when I was afraid. They did their job." But she lets you copy them anyway. The Queen no longer walks far, but she still sits in the garden each morning, sometimes with a blanket around her shoulders, sometimes bareheaded, even when the clouds threaten rain. You ask her if she wants an umbrella. She gives you that same old look, the one that's half affection, half warning. And you realize you'd never really meant it. You're older now. You feel it in your knees when the rains come, and in your sighs when folding yet another stack of the Queen's letters. She's older too, nearing 80, but somehow she's still sharper than anyone you've met half her age. You suspect she knows it too. You spend most days now in her parlor-turned-archive, a space that smells perpetually of sandalwood, pressed paper, and whatever tea someone forgot to drink yesterday. This is where her legacy lives. Shelves upon shelves of sheet music, correspondence, pressed flowers, and newspaper clippings, some flattering, some laughably wrong. It's 1915, and Hawaii is now thoroughly a U.S. territory. The flags have changed, the laws too, but when tourists arrive and ask to hear a real Hawaiian song, it's still hers they hum. Aloha Oi, of course, has become the anthem they don't quite understand. It's been printed in sheet music anthologies across the mainland, recorded on wax cylinders, even performed on early phonographs. You once caught a traveling barbershop quartet singing it with forced cheer at a hotel luau, out of tune and with none of the ache. The Queen heard it too. She smiled the way you do when someone mispronounces your name, but means well. She said they think it's a love song, but it's a funeral dressed in leis. Historians still wonder whether the song's enduring popularity changed its meaning or preserved it. But you've heard the Queen say it more than once. Let them sing it. So long as they feel it, they carry it. One afternoon, a journalist arrives from San Francisco. He's writing a feature on American territories and their most colorful citizens. You watch the Queen nod politely as he asks questions about pineapples, hula girls, and ukuleles, as if they're ingredients in some cartoon recipe for paradise. She corrects him gently with a story about fish pond irrigation and ancient land divisions. His eyes glaze slightly. Still, when he asks if she'll pose for a photograph, she agrees, only if it's in the garden, among her kukui trees. She stands straight-backed in her long black holuku, hands clasped, unsmiling. You can already imagine the caption, "The last Queen of Hawaii, still noble in exile." After he leaves, you both sit in silence for a while. Then she says, "They only call you last when they're trying to forget your beginning." You write that down. She's receiving more requests now. Permission to use her songs, reproduce her memoir, host concerts in her honor. She's grateful, but measured. She insists on proper usage of the Hawaiian lyrics. If they can learn Latin for church, they can learn aloha without butchering it. You pause. "Can you cook poi without water?" She narrows her eyes. "Not unless you enjoy glue." One afternoon, a tourist family approached her garden gate, the father waving excitedly. "Is that the singer lady?" he asks. You prepare to intervene, but the Queen walks over herself, regal as always. The little girl in the group shyly offers her a flower. Liliuokalani kneels slowly, carefully, and accepts it. "Do you know any songs?" she asks the girl. The child nods and begins to sing Aloha Oi, off-key, sweet, and almost unbearably sincere. The Queen hums along. She doesn't need to. Later that week, at a private gathering, the Queen performs a piece she hasn't played in years, Kua Pua I Po Kal'alani, written during her confinement. It speaks of exile, of hidden messages, of flowers blooming behind palace walls. You watch the audience, mostly older Hawaiians, some tearing up, some mouthing the lyrics. A few young people are there too, curious and quiet. They listen, really listen. Afterward, someone says, "I thought she stopped performing." You reply, "She never stopped. She just needed the right audience." In her quieter moments, the queen begins reviewing the details of her estate. She wants everything in order. No confusion, no one fighting over bones and slippers. She's already ensured that most of her wealth will go towards education. The Queen Liliuokalani Trust, founded years earlier, is now a steady force for good, supporting Hawaiian orphans, funding language programs, keeping children grounded in identity. "The children will carry us," she says, "even if they don't know they're doing it." You help her compose one final piece, not a song, but a prayer. It's gentle, written in both Hawaiian and English, filled with rain metaphors and forgiveness. She writes it not for kings or presidents, but for future generations. She wants them to know that we endured, and we endured with grace. And then, on a sunny morning thick with the scent of plumeria and old ink, you find her asleep in her chair, a sheet of lyrics resting gently on her lap. You take it. You file it. You hum it. Because of course you do. You are in a park now, but not in the past. Not quite. It's the 1950s, and Liliuokalani has been gone for years, yet somehow she hasn't. Not really. You sit cross-legged on the grass near her statue in downtown Honolulu. Bronze, graceful, draped in a sculpted holoku, arms held slightly forward, not in surrender, but in welcome. Around her feet, fresh lei bloom daily, dropped off by aunties in mumumus and quiet children clutching spam musubi wrapped in wax paper. It's a different Honolulu than the one you knew by her side. It's louder, busier, with neon signs and diner jukeboxes and military jeeps parked near Waikiki. But if you close your eyes, you can still hear the older rhythm beneath it all. You're here for a reason. A young woman, barely 20, is sitting beside you with a battered notebook and a radio. She's trying to transcribe one of the Queen's compositions by ear, holding the transistor up to one ear while scribbling furiously. The song is Aloha Oe, of course, now filtered through the tinny voice of a crooner from Tennessee. "She sang it like it was hers," the girl says. You nod. She didn't even say where it came from, just said it was a pretty island tune. You nod again. This, too, is part of the story. Historians still debate when Hawaiian music became tourist music. Somewhere between the first cruise ship and the fourth tiki bar, the melodies became background noise, sweet, soft, and stripped of their weight. But not everyone forgets. The girl beside you is part of a movement, still small, still quiet, working to reclaim the stories inside the songs. "My auntie said you used to know the Queen," she says suddenly. You don't correct her. Instead, you tell her the original lyrics, the ones that usually don't get printed in tourist brochures, the ones filled with coded grief, with metaphors of parting, of stolen kisses and stolen lands. She writes them down. She asks if she can record you speaking them so she won't forget the pronunciation. You smile. Of course. You walk with her to the Bishop Museum, where a display case holds the Queen's music notebook, one of them, anyway. She gasps when she sees it. You feel something catch in your throat. You remember when that notebook was still warm, ink still drying, her hand just lifted from the page. Now it's behind glass, but the melody, still free. That night, you attend a backyard luau in Kalihi. There's a pig roasting, kids running barefoot, uncles arguing about who is supposed to bring the beer. It's messy and beautiful and utterly Hawaiian. When someone brings out a ukulele, the girl from earlier asks to play. She sings Aloha Oe, not the tourist version, the whole thing. She adds the verses the queen once whispered to you in the garden. And people notice. They go quiet. Even the uncles stop mid-argument. A few of the older folks close their eyes. A few start to cry. Not because they're sad, because they remember. You sit at the edge of it all, watching a new generation pick up what was almost lost. Not with speeches, not with manifestos, but with melody, breath, and story. It strikes you that this gentle, imperfect revival is the real rebellion. The queen may never have reclaimed her throne, but her songs are reclaiming hearts. Later that week, you visit Iolani Palace. The tour guide is young, but she knows her stuff. She walks tourists through the grand hall, points to the furniture, the portraits, the telephone, the first in Hawaii. One guest whispers, "Hard to believe all this was real." You raise an eyebrow. The guide smiles. "Oh, it was real. Still is. You're standing in it." In the blue room, where the queen once composed during her house arrest, a child presses his face against the glass. "Why'd they lock her up?" he asks. His mother hesitates. You crouch beside him and say gently, "Because she wouldn't give up." He nods like he understands. Maybe he does. You pass the statue again on your way home. Someone's added a new lei since morning. A note is tucked in its folds. You lean in to read it. "Mahalo, Queen, we still hear you." And you do. In backyards, in hula schools, in classrooms where students recite her mele and stumble through conjugations with reverent clumsiness, in the gentle resolve of those who live their culture daily, not for spectacle, not for profit, but because it's who they are. The queen is no longer here in body, but in music, she's everywhere. It's quiet again. Not the hollow quiet of loss, but the full, almost sacred quiet of presence. You're sitting near the royal mausoleum at Mana'ala, a little uphill from Nuuanu Valley, where mist clings to the leaves, like breath held too long. You've come, finally, to sit beside her. Queen Liliuokalani rests here now, beneath an earth wrapped in leis and memory. The stone is modest, the lettering clean, no grand epitaph. Just her name, her title, and the years, 1838 to 1917. You bring no umbrella, of course. You sit in the grass, legs tucked to the side, the way she once did in gardens and parlors and long, exasperating committee meetings. You breathe slowly. The air is thick with ginger, and somewhere nearby a mynah bird is trying out an alarmingly accurate imitation of a car horn. It works, weirdly. You smile. She would have liked that. The final years of her life were quieter, yes, but not idle. After Hawaii became a U.S. territory in 1900, she remained active in legal affairs, charitable work, and music until the very end. She rarely left her home in Washington Place, but the world still came to her. Visitors from all over the islands, kupuna, school teachers, poets, filed in to hear her stories. She gave what she could, not just funds or advice, but encouragement, strength, permission to be both wounded and proud. Historians still debate whether she died of heartbreak or peace, but you were there. You remember her final weeks, her strength still sharp, her wit still present, the way her fingers would twitch toward a piano key even when she was too tired to lift her arm. On her last morning, she requested to be moved near the window. Not the grand window in the sitting room, but the small one in her bedroom that looked toward the sea. You remember adjusting the shutters, letting in the light. She whispered something then, barely audible. You leaned in. still mine. You don't know if she meant the land, the people, the song, or the moment. Maybe all of it. The funeral was a procession like no other. Tens of thousands filled the streets of Honolulu, lining sidewalks, leaning from balconies, some holding candles, some chanting softly. Hawaiians in old ceremonial dress walked beside children in school uniforms. Even those who never met her wept. You walked near the front, carrying a bundle of white ginger and a folded lei made of handwritten verses. Not all of them hers. Some were fragments you'd collected over the years, things she muttered under her breath that turned out to be poetry. Others were yours, humble lines trying to say thank you. A military band played Aloha Oe, slower than usual, tender. You swear the notes hung in the air longer that day, like they didn't want to land. Now here you are, decades later, older still. The world faster, louder, more paved over than she ever feared. But still, beneath all of it, you can hear her. In the rustling of tea leaves, in the syncopated rhythm of slippered feet on sidewalk, in the hush that falls when a school child forgets the words to a chant and starts again. She is everywhere because she planted herself in everything. In the Queen Liliuokalani Trust, still caring for keiki in need. In the schools that now offer Olelo Hawaii classes again. In the auntie who hands her granddaughter a newspaper clipping of the Kue petition with tears in her eyes. In the street musician singing Ke Aloha o Kahaku to no one and everyone at once. You rise slowly. The grass brushes your calves. You place a single flower, yellow ilima, her favorite, at the base of her stone. You whisper, Mahalo, e kuku alihi wahine, ahui ho. Thank you, my queen, until we meet again. And then, just as you turn to go, the wind picks up. Not harsh, not cold, but insistent. It catches the trees, the hem of your shirt, even the melody still stuck in your throat. It carries it uphill, around the bend, and somehow back toward the sea. Aloha, indeed. Now let's leave the queen to her rest. As you walk slowly down from Mana Ala, the air stays thick with memory. Each step feels a little softer now, like the land is holding you up. Your breathing slows, there's no rush, no meetings, no throne to defend. Just the hush of wind through leaves and the soft